You know, I've heard a lot of people lauding about how The Last of Us was a landmark video game able to blend storytelling with gameplay. Gaming as an immersive storytelling medium really has come a long way. However, as great as games like The Last of Us are, I would argue it only makes one significant change compared to what Naughty Dog were doing before. A significant change, but it's more about perspective than it is anything substantial. As a developer, they've shown a continual shift towards cinematic storytelling across all of their games since the original Crash Bandicoot. The first Naughty Dog trilogy franchise had a story only so much as it provided a motive for the player to move from point A to B and then overcome a boss. Avatar, Nemesis, motive. But even within the lifetime of the original PlayStation console, you saw ambition in their storytelling start to develop. In the second and third games, there are semi-regular, fully voiced cutscenes to update the player as to the evolving plot. While Naughty Dog moved into the PS2 era fully committed to narrative-based gameplay, their Jak and Daxter series abandons the modular level setup from Crash, and it created a giant proto-open world. These are not open world environments as we know of them today. There is no grand overworld, so whilst the environments are largely a series of interconnecting corridors with multiple hubs, it was a core goal of the design team that Jak can run from one end of the world to another without ever hitting a single loading screen. Furthermore, they filled this world with an increasingly large array of complex characters. With Jak 2, they gave their main character a voice, and they used it to tell a somewhat childish but still very engaging personal tale of revenge. Naughty Dog invested the player with personal stakes that went beyond the simple setting. And upon completion of Jak 3 and the capping of their platforming trilogy, while some of the team worked on their obligatory racing spin-off, Naughty Dog looked ahead to the PlayStation 3 with a clear goal in mind. Feedback to their immersive storytelling had been positive, but there were still issues. The story was relayed almost exclusively through fully animated cutscenes, with dynamic cameras and expert voice acting. Playing through these games hits a steady formula: cutscene, mission, cutscene, travel to another area, cutscene, mission, cutscene, travel to another area, repeat. There is some in-game dialogue, but it's incidental. To move beyond this, they needed a more realistic world, a scenario where they could blend the storytelling with the gameplay much more fluidly. With Daxter, they had found that adding a secondary character to interact with the protagonist gave the player something to interact with, but Daxter, by design, was almost functionally useless as a gameplay aid, and rather just there to provide puns and a quick joke. So after much soul searching, they settled upon something a little bit more realistic than dancing bandicoots or wise-cracking Ottsels. The game developers turned their sights on the popular film franchises such as Indiana Jones, or the more contemporary National Treasure, or the video game franchise Tomb Raider. They wanted an everyman hero as opposed to the uptight Lara Croft, and so they settled into the creation of the freewheeling Nathan Drake. Wisecracking but sincere, a work hard, play hard realist with a bit of an idealistic streak in him. Nathan Drake was a fantastic character. Increases in processing power meant that, compared to past avatars, they were able to imbue him with so much more expression, using motion capture to fully animate him to react perfectly to his environment. Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, plays like a dream. Part third-person shooter, part action platformer, it masterfully weaves a path across these distinct genres to create a new experience that would not have been possible on older consoles. The story is intrinsically linked into the gameplay, with the plot organically weaving in mission objectives and new destinations to make it feel like set pieces in a movie rather than a selection of levels or a mission checklist. Sony loves to go on about the power of PlayStation, and Naughty Dog have always been one of the most proficient studios for harnessing the potential of their machines. The gameplay engine is able to shift between run and gun, first person shooter, wall climbers and cutscenes without ever pausing for breath. Cohesion between all of these components is paramount towards the final experience. The game is a little short, however. So much time and energy was spent perfecting the mechanics and developing the characters that the experience just flies by. All of the story is set on or around two small tropical islands, so there's not a lot of variety in settings, which may be the game's biggest problem. It lacks variety. Moving between the jungle, castle and abandoned ruins and underground base, that's your lot. That said, a lot is made of this small availability. For most of the game, your destination is visible in the distance with key landmark locations, the fortress, the harbour, the final compound, all visible long before you approach them. The only problematic section is the brief trips underground into sewers or an abandoned Nazi base, which are fine. Actually a really good short burst of horror to spice up the gameplay, but they come with the downside of severely restricting player choice. The clear mission structures of the old Jack games are abandoned so that the storyline meshes into the gameplay much more smoothly. Gameplay still pauses for cutscenes, but they are usually short and the dialogue continues to carry on after the player resumes control. This is an adventure game, so the story, so much as there is, largely consists of go here next, now look over there, but it feels natural as that and is largely how the original inspiration movies worked. As I mentioned, the treasure hunting genre is a well explored trope, but I'd argue that this plays to the game's strengths. It's an absolutely fantastic experience, but there is one fundamental problem, and it comes back to Nathan Drake, or rather the two Nathan Drakes. There are two versions of this man. One Nathan Drake is a charmer, a loyal friend who has a strong moral code and a complex emotional relationship. This is the Nathan from the short but regular cutscenes that break up the gameplay. The other Nathan Drake is a cold-blooded psychopath who mows down anyone who gets in his way, and he calmly laughs about it afterwards. Throughout the game, Drake is ambushed by pirates and mercenaries, and though they usually shoot first, the player has no choice but to go in guns blazing. Canonically, there does not appear to be much overlap between these two personas, so the writers are able to make much work of the violence within the cutscenes, but they patiently ignore the fact that the player has carried out mass murder to get there. The enemy pirates are not treated as people but obstacles to be overcome, which is one way that the game extends its runtime. Uncharted has several different modes. Health packs are a thing of the past, so the player automatically heals if they're damaged, but they do it over time. At lower difficulties, this essentially means you can charge through most fights, but at higher difficulties, 2 or 3 hits are enough to spell Drake's doom. Given how much of the game is interspersed gunfights, that can cause a problem. The Uncharted games, and this original one especially, are an important landmark in storytelling through video games. There is a clash between the actions of the player and the go-easy persona of Nathan in the cutscenes, but anyone who can get past that will find a lot to enjoy about this game. The story is light, popcorn fare, but it knows exactly what it is trying to do. This game launched an engine, a manifesto of cohesive design, with a story seamlessly blended into gameplay that Naughty Dog had been working towards for years. The sequels arguably told better stories, with more varied locations, a multitude of incremental changes that meant Uncharted 2 would be lauded as the system seller that justified the exorbitant cost of the PS3, but it would never have happened without this vital step. Future franchises would then bridge that cognitive gap between the actions of the player character and the player avatar in the cutscenes. But I'd argue it isn't a problem if the story embraces its tongue-in-cheek silliness. Do people watch Indiana Jones for the deep emotional drama, or do they do it to be entertained? Personally, I'm happy to break out the popcorn for a simple romp if it's competently told. And though other franchises can separately do all of the individual things Uncharted tries, often individually better, this amalgamation is nothing but effortlessly competent. This one comes highly recommended with popcorn on the side.